Give me the news. I got a bad case of loving you. Welcome to the EvelChat Coaching Podcast, brought to you by EveltrakSport.com. This is episode number 1, The Doctor. I'm not sure what exactly made me want to have this discussion, but I'm so glad I did. You're about to meet Dr. Scott Samlan, husband, father, boxer, hospital builder, manager, stress junkie, and doctor. But not just any doctor. Scott is an emergency medicine physician and CEO of Northwest Indiana ER and Hospital. It sits just outside of Chicago, across the Indiana state line. There he is, being one of the frontline workers in the fight against COVID-19 for the past 6 months. Before that, however, for 15 years he was an emergency room physician and leader for a number of inner-city hospitals in Chicago, dealing with some of the hairiest, most professionally challenging experiences a doctor can face, often managing multiple life and death crises, literally at the same time. I wasn't sure when I asked Scott to sit down and talk with me if I was going to be able to make the case that the picture he painted of his and his colleagues' experiences were even remotely relative to ours as coaches. But from the moment he started talking about his work, I knew this would be valuable. It's like he and his colleagues live under this menacing overhead conveyor belt that randomly but surely trundles off its end down into their laps these giant intensive highs and burdensome heavy lows, not to mention sporadic inspiring successes and soul-bruising, deflating failures. It's a life that tosses them up, down, forwards, backwards, sideways, round and round, then back again, occasionally stopping just long enough to let them go home to a different, more personal reality. That can't be easy. So why do it? Sure, the money's good, but like a lot of my colleagues in sport, these people are brilliant and very accomplished. They could be making far more doing other kinds of things, other kinds of medicine. Why put up with the chaos and the headaches? Well, as a great Canadian poet once wrote, nothing worth having comes without some sort of fight. You've got to kick at the darkness till it bleeds daylight. Does all that sound familiar? Well, it should. At least if you're a committed coach, it should. You see, Scott is my neighbor, and over the past year and a half or so, while passing between our homes and getting to know one another, we've had numerous chats regarding his work, my work, its impact on our families, and the overlap of our experiences both professionally and personally. Yeah, I know, coaching isn't exactly ER medicine. In fact, at first glance, it's miles from ER medicine. But it is important, meaningful work. The kind of work that attracts, at least in my mind, the same types of personalities that get drawn into Scott's world. Those who can mentally shift from whiplash-triggering multitasking to an extreme rigorous focus, divorced from the attention-sucking pandemonium that often surrounds them. And they must go from one to the other in just a breath or two. To do this, one must be an all-in-one passionate humanist, benevolent taskmaster, and top-shelf problem solver that thrives off a chaotic environment. Outsiders might call such environments bedlam, but we call it work. In short, both attract those who demand success and despise, maybe even fear, failure. You know, having said all that, now that I think of it, maybe the gap between our seemingly distant professions isn't so far apart after all. Maybe the only difference in terms of the impacts we have on others' futures has to do with scope and timelines. Ours are small, measured over months, years, or even decades. And theirs? Well, theirs are titanic, measured in mere hours, minutes, or even seconds. Now, for better or for worse, here's my discussion with Dr. Scott Samlan. Okay, good. So how you doing, man?
I'm great.
Yeah?
I'm actually doing pretty well. Thank you.
Yeah? Day off today.
Day off today. Worked last night.
How's the coffee, all right?
Excellent.
Good.
Today's a good day.
Yeah, good. Did you hear about the murder at Grand and...
You
start off with his Grand...
You got to narrow it down.
Grand and Damon.
Grand and Damon?
Grand and Damon the other day.
Yeah, 3 blocks away from our house. Sure.
Yeah, 3 blocks. Oh, God. How would you describe our neighborhood? Because I was like I love living here, and everybody I talk to, like, back home, they ask me, they're always asking me, oh man, you're living in Chicago, and we live right next to, it starts getting pretty rough as you go south and west of here. But when I'm talking to my friends back home, they're like, how could you, but I say to them, well, you kind of have to be here. It's a really cool neighborhood. I really love living here, but we're like kind of the last, how do I say this without, sounding is, our neighborhood, like you go out of our neighborhood and it starts getting rougher. I mean, I go down there all the time. I take my son down there all the time. I don't mind riding my bike through there, but there are, as when it starts to get kind of crazy, but I love Chicago, man. I mean, and this is the first place I've ever lived where I've interacted with my neighbors the way that we do, like you guys. So just to set some context here, you are not just my neighbor, you're my next door neighbor.
Right.
And we live in identical homes.
Correct.
Built by the same builder. How far apart are our homes, you think? 5 feet?
If that?
If that, yeah. I don't even think it's 5 feet. I don't think you and I could lay down and straight in between.
No, we're on top of each other.
Yeah, for sure. So, are you from Chicago?
From the suburbs, but yeah, pretty much born and raised.
Okay, and Melissa is from Jersey?
New Jersey.
Right, okay. So, you guys have 2 kids. How old's Jack?
Jack's 1.5.
He's 1.5 now.
And
so
Ricky just turned 3.
Just turned 3. So, Paul, I was arranging with Melissa today. Paulie and Ricky are going to make cookies tomorrow.
Oh, nice.
Maybe tomorrow or the next day. I'm not sure.
That's awesome.
I have to. You and I have to talk about next weekend too, getting together for Christmas. But yeah. Point is that we live next to each other, and we've gotten to know each other over the last year and a half, and we've had a few discussions and learning what you do and some of your experiences, even where you went to school. I thought, I've been turning this in my head as I've been waiting for my work visa to sort of come through and get back to the work on my website and start this podcast. I thought that this would be a great interview because, and I don't know where it's going to go. I don't know. I mean, maybe coaches won't get a lot out of it or whoever is going to listen to it. But I just thought that maybe there's some crossover there in terms of the experiences that you've had. And I know coaches go through that just, might be a little different, something they haven't heard before. And, you might have some insight for sure, because based on the discussions you and I have had in the past, yeah. So I think, so what do you think?
I think that's great. Yeah. I think that's great intro.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. So what do I call what you do? You're an ER doc. Okay. You just opened your own ER, which is in Indiana, which sounds a long ways away, but it's really not. You're just on the other side of the border. So it takes you 40 minutes to drive or something like that. I've been there, so you've taken me on a tour. It's cool. It's kind of like a drive-through ER, sort of, right? It's like a small, I don't want to sort of diminish it, but I mean, it's really, really advanced, high tech. But you are like, it's a small ER hospital, and that's all you do, right?
So the reason why we did this is that I've been working in ER for 15 plus years. And a lot of what I've seen the face of medicine change. A lot of it has been taken away from clinicians, and a lot of it's done by bureaucrats.
Right.
Pretty much. People who have never been in the bedside of the patient making decisions up high and just kind of bringing it down to the physicians and the nurses, say this is what we're doing now, without seeing a patient. And more is placed on metrics in terms of how quickly you see the patients, how quickly you get them in the ER, what's your admission rate, what's your discharge rate, are you making sure you check the boxes so the government pays the money that's owed to us, and it's became pretty. And at the same time, you have to make sure that all the boxes are checked in order for the hospital to get reimbursed, in order for you to get paid. And a lot of it I think it's a detriment of the patient.
Right.
And then also you have something called press gania, which are scores that patients get. And it's a very difficult position because number one is that you want to take care of your patients. At the same time, you got to make them happy. And it's kind of difficult if you're bottlenecked at the hospital. I mean,
right.
how can you have a good score if you're waiting in the hallway, or waiting for 3 hours for a test, or you're waiting for 3 hours to go upstairs because all the rooms are full?
Right.
So a lot of this is beyond our control, and we're asked to do things that, I mean, it's almost impossible.
Right. Well, you just walked right into a crossover, because that's something that I fought my whole career against, right? Which is the challenge of, you know, having to manage a sport, or in your situation, a hospital, because somebody's got to do that, and they have to, you know, there's an expertise to that.
Sure.
But then the people on the ground, the ones who are actually doing it, in your case it's doctors, in my case it's coaches, they have a certain way of doing things, right? And they know, I mean, obviously they're the ones who know what really needs to be done, but these bureaucrats get wrapped up in their own shit, and, you know, they start getting on the hamster wheel, and it does all become about metrics and blah, blah, blah. And I mean, we see it at all levels: coaching, education, performance, everything. And when I was in Britain, and tell me if this sounds familiar to you. So when I worked in Britain, I was a center director for an Olympic training center. Okay, that was set up, funded before the London Olympics. Okay, and there was 2 of them. I was a director of one, and a good friend of mine, Dan Paff, he's American, he was a director of the other. Okay, his was to serve London athletes, mine was to serve everybody else in the UK. Okay, so the best analogy I think I could come up, it's going into a home Olympics. Okay, this is not just any Olympics, this is a home Olympics in Britain. It would be like which is like the Super Bowl of Olympics for them, right? Because, you know, track and field is up there as a sport. It's probably one of the top 3 sports in England. So, you know, it was like being, you know, like, imagine you're coming into the apocalypse and you're in Israel, and there's 2 synagogues, and you're a rabbi and I'm the rabbi in one of them, my buddy's a rabbi in the other, right? Mm-hmm. And the way that the leadership was set up with UK athletics was, they hired, for that 4-year period going into the Olympics, they hired coaches to do these management and leadership roles, right? And that was great. We did a great job, but we all hated it. It's not us, right? It's just not us. It's just not, that's not what we all wanted to be coaching, right? And we took the job because, you know, it was exciting, the money was good, the opportunity was fantastic. I don't have no regrets about doing it, but I mean, the point of all of that is that at the end of 4 years, and we were very successful. Mm-hmm. At the end of 4 years, we all left. We were like, fuck this, man, because we just like, we were all burned out, right? Because it's that kind of thinking that just grinds down the people that like to be in the mix, right? They like the hands-on and doing that. And so it sounds like, you know, you're going through the same thing. So your solution was to set up your own shop.
Absolutely. I'm going to paraphrase. I read something, and it was just on point about being an ER doctor or a nurse or working in the ER. And again, this is a paraphrase. I consider an ER doctor to be a pilot on an airplane. Okay. Just imagine the airplane is a decrepit, falling apart airplane. Inside of it, every single seat is full. And there's people in the alleys, in the galley. So it's totally packed. One patient is in 4-point restraints because they're drunk and they're intoxicated. Another passenger is extremely sick and puking. You have kids that are running around. One person, who usually is psych, is trying to constantly open up while you're at 20,000 or 30,000 feet, trying to open the emergency exit, so you have to have somebody to bring them down. And then at the same time, you're trying to manage all this. And at the end of that, if you don't crash your plane, also, you're short-staffed on You're short-staffed on flight attendants. So you only have 2 people dealing with all this, and you have to manage everything. And then when you land the plane, everybody who's in the plane gets a survey and says, "How was your experience?"
Exactly.
It's just not tenable. It's bullshit. So What we wanted to do when we build our hospital, and a lot of us were like, look at, man, things have got to change. And we said, what if we run our own shop, build our own hospital, and it'd be different.
And this is what, you and a couple of buddies?
Me and 5 other ER doctors. Okay. We had a blueprint. One of our partners out in Texas did it, and it's been successful. So we said, what we're going to do is build a smaller model. 20,000 square foot hospital, 8 ER beds, 6 inpatient beds, the full gamut of radiology, so MRI, CAT scan, ultrasound, x-ray, and give patients the experience that they deserve. Don't treat them as a number, treat them as a patient. So you have time, and we don't want to overcrowd it, so you sit down, talk to the patient. Doctors seeing patients instead of like a mid-level who, they're great, but they don't have the same skills and expertise as a doctor. I mean, we go to school for 12 years. They go 3 years, and they're great, but...
Are these like interns becoming doctors?
No, this is called physician assistants or nurse practitioners. Okay. So they go to school for 3 years, and they're set out into the world, and they're under the auspices of a doctor, but sometimes they don't see the patients, and they can... And a lot of they're fantastic, but it's difficult in the ER. So what we try to do is spend less time in front of a computer and more time with the patients. That's pretty much. And everything we do is geared towards the patient, not metrics, the patients.
Well, yeah,
cool. So, and we've done it, and I got to tell you, I mean, a lot of people, especially in healthcare, are so fried, especially with COVID.
Well, that's where I was going to go next. I mean, I don't want to get too into COVID because it's really not what I wanted to talk about, but I think I'd be derelict in my duty if we didn't mention it, because you go and open up your own shop. It's this beautiful new hospital, and you guys are, I mean, I remember going, when you took me on the tour, it was pretty cool. But then COVID hits.
Yeah.
And you're just like, well, you were smashed before. Well, we'll get to that in a second. But now, it's now, and we're recording this, what is it, December 11th? Yeah. So where are we in this second wave? We're in the second wave. It's late 2020. How are things? Is it still real bad? Because, I mean, I remember talking to you, it was pretty rough there for a while.
Yeah. Almost all hospitals run on capacity. So,
right. So it's as bad as they say.
It's yeah, and what drives, I think, everybody in the healthcare field kind of nuts is that some people say it's a hoax. And look, I'm telling you, I see it every day. A lot of younger people are going to be okay.
Right.
But the elderly patients and some patients who have comorbidities, diabetes, obesity, they don't fare as well. I mean, right. I see people who are 35, 40 who don't really have any underlying conditions. Incredibly sick, on oxygen, on steroids, on medication.
Are these would you call these healthy people, or would you say generally
like normal guy you see on the street, like really, maybe a little overweight, but just normal guys? Yeah. And some of them do okay, and some of them like, why is this guy so sick? And we don't know.
Wow.
We have some ideas, but and the scientific community has been great over the last 6 months trying to figure out. This is what's working. This is not. Let's try this. I mean, it's been 6 years to figure
this shit out, right?
I mean, they're really smart.
It's just so not fair how some of these experts are getting. Everybody wants answers right away, and I know in coaching, man, you can't. You need data. Like you need time with an athlete to get to understand what they're about, what they're capable of doing. That takes time. There's no way to rush that, right? And not all the money in the world is not going to help you. And we see that all the time. You put, this is my experience in Britain, you force athletes into centers because the centers where all the money is, and they don't do shit or they don't do as well as you think, because the expectation is that when you put them in there, they're going to be, it's just better because you have everything. But that doesn't, there's a certain measure of this that takes time to understand.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yes. So, and I feel like parallels with athletes as well. You have a strength and a conditioning coach. So how do you get an athlete or even a physician, how do you get them to think quicker, how to act faster? What data do you have that say this athlete does things better because of why? It's not overnight. No. Is it fast twitch fibers? Fast twitch fibers is the way they train, is the way they perceive what they need to do. How fast are they going through the? And that's why coaching is so important. Kind of like, I think the parallels between teaching a resident how to become a attending physician, as well as teaching an amateur athlete who has talent how to get them to the next level.
Right.
And you just got to throw in the mix.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, what coaches don't understand a lot of times is when you're talking about metrics or you're trying to study something, right? And I would imagine it's the same when you're trying to deal with this disease. It's like just because you have a couple of studies or a little bit of information that points you in one direction doesn't mean shit, right? I mean, you need, that's why it takes years to develop some of these things. You need lots of it because there's a difference between causation and correlation. Just because the two things are in front of you does not mean that one is causing the other, right? And I can see why they're hesitant to, for people who don't understand that concept, I can see why they would look at it and say, oh yeah, well, it's simple. You have the answer right in front of you. Why the fuck didn't you tell us? Well, it's because, we know that may not be the answer, right? Like just because we have a little bit of, so it takes a while, and it's just, so you see them beat up on these experts, and it's not right. So I totally get that, but so okay, so you've been it's been tough, it's been difficult. You guys are dealing with it, and are we getting better right now? You don't know yet. You don't know.
I don't. I think
it's too soon.
Yeah, it's too soon. I think we have a better grasp on how to take care of patients who are really sick.
Right.
I think we're learning just, again, like we talk about, sheer numbers of patients that we see, and I think it's pretty cool to be in healthcare and be a doctor right now. Even from social media, on Facebook group chats, like, hey, we've tried this with XYZ patient. It seemed studies are coming out. So I feel like social media and just these group chats we're talking about, like, this is working with these patients. People are adapting it. So we have to adapt so quickly.
Yeah.
And it's been pretty cool that the collaboration. Like, so I have friends now in Italy when this all started. Remember that? Wow. This was like a year ago. Yeah. Saying it's terrible. Remember how bad it was? I think it was February. Of 20. How bad it was, and people were just dying left and right. And I feel like, okay, they were saying this is what works, and then people in Germany were saying this is what we're doing. And then when it hit U.S., we had some knowledge of what's going on, how we can kind of prepare for it.
Right.
And I feel like the scientific community has been, I think it's a real privilege to work in medicine. I know it's terrible being a pandemic, but hopefully we never see another pandemic in our lifetime. Last pandemic was 1918, the Spanish flu. So we were kind of in the front lines, and this is what we're trained to do. So it's pretty cool that we see on a day-to-day basis, we actually are making a difference in patient's life, which is pretty cool.
I just want to make a note right now. If you're listening to this and you're hearing movement and some weird breathing, my dog is sitting on my lap, Bandit, who, by the way, your son absolutely adores, and your daughter, but your son only has a connection with my dog.
His only friend, man. It's COVID. I mean, he's 1.5. He's got two friends.
And one's a dog. That's awesome.
He's got a 50-year-old man and a dog. That's his buddy.
It's me and Bandit are Jack's buddies. Yeah, for sure. He's a great kid. We'll get to that near the end here, but so this collaboration with these colleagues, is that something that is set up for you? Like, is that something that the medical establishment, quote unquote, has set up a sort of a portal, or are you guys just reaching out wherever you can to whoever?
It's completely grassroots.
Really?
Cool.
That's cool.
Completely grassroots.
Yeah.
Like, I'm on one of the things called EM Docs. It's that Facebook group, and every day it's like, hey, I'm trying XYZ. Oh, cool. What do you think about that? And there's brilliant people. Like, if you look at the study of 3 years ago, and there's a lot of like people who are much smarter than me saying studies or seeing it's just really cool how people are working together and collaborating, and it's not political. It's just like, how do we get patients better? It's pretty cool that, and of course
that's coaching, dude.
It's not blue or red. Of course, you have crazies on both sides, but it's pretty much this is what's working. It's nothing politicized. It's like, how do we get our patients better? Right. So it's been really cool.
It's that's again, wow. So this is great because coaching is the same thing, right? Like, so in coaching, typically what you have, there's sort of two streams of education, right, in coaching. One is the formal stream that may come from a university or some kind of, an academic source, or a sport federation will create their own, and these can be really good, right? Like, but typically they're 10 years behind what's really going on, right? Like what the cutting edge coaches are doing. The other stream is what you just said, right? It's mentorship that coaches create themselves. Like when I was a young coach, I mean, I was up in fucking Podunk, Canada, in the middle of the mountains, and I had my first big athlete was an athlete who won a medal at the World Junior Championships in the 400. And so all these U.S. coaches started to recruit him, and I was getting phone calls. And I got this phone call from a guy named Dan Paff. And Dan Paff is he's at the top of the coaching education and performance. And I mean, he's got like a dozen Olympic medalists under his belt. I don't know. He's the guy that was the other center director in Britain. Became a good friend of mine. He was recruiting this guy. I got to know him. Ultimately, he ended up not going to the U.S., but I made 4 pilgrimages down to where he was coaching. Canada had a sprinter named Donovan Bailey. You may or may not have heard of him. Okay, so he won in Atlanta, right? And on Americans' home turf, right? Yeah. And our relay team, I don't know if you remember this, but we beat the Americans in the 4x1 in Atlanta, okay? The first time in history that anyone had ever beaten it was the first time in history that anyone had beaten the Americans in the 4x1 when the Americans were able to get the baton around. So if the Americans didn't drop it, they never lost. It's the first time ever, and we beat them on their home turf, right? Well, Dan coached, I think, 3 of the 4 guys on that team, but he's American, okay? So I made 4 pilgrimages, I have a hard time saying that word, down to Texas, and he was in Austin. He still lives there. And, that changed everything for me, man. It opened up a whole world of like, oh my God, this is what's possible. You know what I mean? No fucking books weren't telling me this. Like, so it's the same sort of thing. But anyways, let's God, we could go on forever now. I'm seeing this could go on forever. But I know this is your day off. I don't want to take up too much of your time. So that's what you're doing. That's great. But that's only you. How long ago did you open the hospital? 8 months?
6 months.
6 months ago. Okay. So before that, as you said, you had 15 years in ER. Is it ER medicine? Is it trauma medicine? Is that
emergency medicine?
What's that?
Emergency medicine.
Emergency medicines. Okay. So before that, you were an ER doc here in Chicago. You're at 5 hospitals, and you had an oversight of those, right? Like you were
the regional director.
You were a regional director.
Yeah. So the medical director of each of those sites reported back to me.
Okay, but you were on.
I was working. Sure.
Yeah. Okay. So the second time I'll never forget this, man. The second time I ever met you was you were coming in from you coming out of your Raptor, your Ford Raptor, and I was like, and I remember seeing the Raptor on the street going, this is like my favorite truck, right?
I love it.
And I'm like,
my only toy.
Who's driving the Raptor in this neighborhood? And it turns out this is my neighbor. Oh, great. Anyways, you were coming in and we were chatting, and you looked like fucking like you death warmed over you were just beat to shit. And I remember I said, we had introduced ourselves before, but it was really fast. And so you came in and we talked for about 10 minutes, and you said to me, you said to me, you go, yeah, man, we had 14 shootings last night on this one. I think it was either on your shift or in the whatever. And I was like, what? I mean, you have to understand where I come from. I'll bet you the hospital that serves the region I come from in Canada has not had 14 shootings in 5 years. Like, it would not surprise me. I'm totally pulling that out of my ass. I don't know, but I'll bet you. So that's a pretty unique experience, right? Like I mean, I can't think of, how many hospitals get that kind of activity?
I want to say only a handful, but it's not true, because in the area that we live, you have Christ, University of Chicago, Cook County, which is now Stroger, Mount Sinai. I mean, those hospitals see a tremendous amount of volume of penetrating trauma every day, every
Penetrating
year.
Trauma?
Yeah, penetrating trauma, which is either stabbings, gunshots, etc.
Life-threatening.
Life-threat, yeah.
Crowbars.
crazy stuff. And it's everybody who works, and I mean,
We got to tell the crowbar story. Can you tell the crowbar story or no? No. Can I tell it?
I'll tell it. So,
Well, you told me a story.
this was not at my hospital, but a colleague of mine told us that there was like an argument in somewhere on the west side of Chicago, and somebody tried to carjack somebody. So the guy picked up. It actually wasn't a crowbar. It was the lift that you have to put to jack up a car.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's
What's
a
that
crowbar.
called? Yeah, I guess it is crowbar. So you screw it in. So a guy
A pry bar.
A pry bar.
Yeah.
So a guy went to steal his car. So the guy took it and harpooned it, and it went through the guy's face. And he came in. It was my way to the hospital. The guy came in, and he was alive. And I don't know how they did it, but it was literally impaled in the guy's face. The guy lived.
We got to find that guy and make him a javelin thrower.
Yeah, I mean, I can't believe, and I don't know how he did it. Whoosh, threw a javelin,
lived.
went through a guy's face, through and through, and the guy's alive. I don't know how he was, but yeah.
I mean, it's crazy, eh? Like what the body can take, and yet this little virus comes along and can kill a guy who's.
This is what's crazy that we see. Like so, and again, my trauma surgeons, they deal primarily, they take them to the OR and stuff like. We see people who get shot like 12 times and are alive, and then we see
12
times like
at once.
Yes, and like alive and be okay. And sometimes they miss like maybe they perf their intestines, but they can do a colostomy and stuff like that. And, 12 times, just boom, 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 with 12 gunshots. The trauma surgeons are amazing in Chicago.
Right.
They'll take out part of the liver, or they'll put a colostomy for them and take care of the intestines and stuff like that, and they'll repair this stuff, and the guy will like live, or the guy or girl will live. And then you see some person with a little like 9mm get shot in one area and just die, which is crazy. So
I mean, okay, this is going to sound like a really naive elementary question, okay? So other than the heart and the brain, what's the metric that what's the line where once you've crossed it, that's it? There's no saving this person. Is it like they've lost a certain amount of blood, the blood pressure drops too low? Is it like where is it where you've gone past the point where homeostasis is ever going to bring them back? Or is there?
So I've seen people literally come in dead, and they get them back and they're alive. And I've seen people with GSW, gunshot wounds, like the heart and live. Sometimes when you get hit in the brain.
Really?
Yeah. Hit in the... I've
GSW, gunshot wounds.
Yeah, gunshot wounds.
You have an acronym for it.
Sorry, yeah, gunshot wounds, but...
Okay.
It doesn't make any rhyme or reason, but a lot of times when people come in, they get shot in the head. Like, I've seen people live through that, but it depends. If they come in and they're not responding to everything, it's pretty much they're done. But I've seen people get shot in the chest and code, which means they lose their vitals and stuff. And I've seen trauma surgeons open their chest, suture a bullet, or put like a tamponade, like a little balloon, like a Foley balloon, that they inflate and keep the heart like pumping. And these people like live, suture the heart, and like these people are live.
My God.
It's called like a clamshell, which means they take a knife and they open up the chest cavity. And they stick their hands in there, and they have a rib spreader, and they get to the heart, and they flip the heart, see what thing, and they can either sew it or put a balloon in to stop the bleeding, and take them at the operator, and somehow they save their lives. I'm like, trauma surgeons are the most badass people I've ever met, just badass.
So, is there a personality archetype that is attracted to that? Like you and I have had this discussion, right? Like you love it.
Yeah,
right? I mean, it's like coaching. So there's like, I love to be in the thick of things and
Sure.
at competitions, and we'll get to that in a minute. But like being at an Olympics or World Champs or something, but where it's crazy. But like, does it attract all types, or do you see a common trait in the guys that are good, or women that are good?
And I think that's a great question. I think. So the ER physicians are kind of like the mavericks of medicine. We are shift workers. We're on and we're off, and it's hard to leave it at the door. But
Right, because nobody makes an appointment to get shot.
Correct. Yeah,
Right.
and you have to be in your game all the time.
Right.
Like when you start your shift at 6 a.m., you don't know what's going to walk through the door. So you got to be in your game all the time. So it's not like you can go out and like, oh, I'll stumble through the shift. No, like the night before, go to sleep earlier, get in work, because you have to have your shit. No, you have to have your shit together all the time, which is pretty cool. And I think most ER doctors, and it's we're strange people. I mean, we work nights, we work days, we're all over the place. And you have to be good at multitasking, and you have to be able to put your emotions on the side. Wow. So you have
to have a game face
all the time.
Yeah.
So you have, let's say you have a room that's on fire. You have like 20 patients. You're running around. You get somebody who an OD or got shot. You have to, okay, all right, I got to go talk to the family. Talk to the family.
So you got to shut it
down.
off.
No, you don't shut it. Everybody's got their own spiel. Right. Like I talk to the family. Hi, I'm Dr. Samlan. I'm so sorry I have to meet you. What happened? I tell you, etc. I'm so sorry to tell you that James or Mike or Michelle died. Not passed away, not moved on. They died. And then they don't really hear anything. But I always say, you did everything right. There's nothing you could have done differently. You called on one. You did everything you can. This is not on you. I wish there was something you did. We did everything we can to keep them, unfortunately.
And in the back of your head, in those crazy moments, you know you got 3 other Mikes or Michelles waiting for you, right? Like people are going, holy shit, get Scott, right?
Well, that's the thing. It's like, yeah, give me, like, you have to make sure the room's like, okay, I'll like tell the nurse, I'll be back in 5 minutes. Talk to the family, and it's heartbreaking. Like sometimes I cry, and if you stop, if that part of your job becomes easy, you got to find another career.
Yeah.
So,
sure.
But you can't shut it off. It's like you talk to the family, and then you can't be like you're sad, you're emotional for like 30 seconds, and then let's fucking go. What do you get? Because there's other people with chest pains or strokes or dizziness and other overdose they have to deal with. So you can't sit and kind of think about that moment. Like, let's fucking go.
Yeah, and you can't. I mean, I don't know anything about what you do, but I would. If there's one thing I think I can safely assume is you can't pass that responsibility off to someone else.
No, that's your
job. It has to be the doctor, right?
Yeah.
Fuck, if the accountant, the hospital accountant comes out and tells you that, and if it was me and my kid, I'd be pretty pissed. I mean, that's gonna hurt. So.
I do that in most of the facilities I worked at were teaching residents, so I never do a first year. I bring the first year resident or a second year, like kind of like probably athletes. You gotta train them. Like you can't just say, "Oh, tell those patients that their loved one dies," because they're not gonna remember anything until you tell them that person died. Everything after that, they're not gonna remember it. But you can't stand at the door. You can't fold your hands. You sit down. You hold your hand. They hold their hand, or they talk to them. You need to sit down and be a doctor, and you talk to them, and you need to be compassionate. And that's why I tell the residents, like, don't do it from the freaking doorway. Sit your ass down, talk to the family. And a lot of times, we learn about medicine, but the human touch, a lot of it, you don't have that. I mean, sometimes in residency, yeah, but nobody really sits down until you do it with an attending, or you do it because you're not going to learn one.
Do you get any counseling on this?
During residency.
During residency.
That's what's so great. It's kind of like ethics. It's like a mentorship. When you're in residency, you go for 3 or 4 years.
Or coaches mentoring other coaches.
And they kind of like do one, see one, teach one.
Yeah.
So you sit down, you talk to it, and everybody finds their own way to navigate this, their own cadence to speak to patients.
Right.
And that's what makes you all individual.
It's funny you say that because yesterday I was interviewing a buddy of mine, Stu McMillan, and one of the things we were talking about was you have mentors in coaching, like this Dan Paff guy that I was talking about. He's one of my mentors, but I don't try to be like Dan, right? Like, in my coaching didn't really take off until I learned that, and I learned, like, I can't be like him. I can learn from him. I can learn from his, what he does well, and apply that to my own environment, my own personality. But I can't be like him. I can't try to be like him. I don't want to try to talk like him. I have to do it my way, but he's going to show me, the do's and don'ts and the ins and outs and things like that. And I have other mentors as well. So it sounds like it's the same thing, right? Like you're going to, if the doctor walks into the room in that situation and it's clear he's reading off of someone else's script, well, that's just as bad as the accountant coming in, right? Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? It has to be personal. I don't know how it couldn't be personal from my perspective, but I'm sure, You know,
you got to realize, I mean, this takes a mental and emotional toll on you. Telling somebody, especially when you have kids die, I mean, that's the hardest part. If you have a pediatric death and you tell the family, and then, but there's nobody there to pick up the slack. You got to work. So you deal with that. And it's kind of like you take those feelings and you bury them deep, deep inside of you, and you go home and you fucking have a bourbon.
Out front with Derek and Cheney and Ethan, which is another thing I love about living here, man. In the summer, everybody stands out front and hangs out. That's fucking great. In coaching, tell me if this resonates with you. So in coaching, one of the, it's a very yin yang kind of thing. So on the one hand, you want the personality that is attracted to coaching is one that can do a lot of the things that you discuss, right? Like we like the excitement, we're good at multitasking, but when you become a professional coach, there's a certain part of it that where you have to be able to contain that, or people want to contain that, right? So in other words, like it's difficult right now the way things are going with our the tolerance people have for non-PC type behavior, let's call it that, right? And people, people are now expecting coaches to act a certain way, right? Be a certain way. But it's very, that's a big ask, because they also want the other side of the coach, right? They want the guy who is, can react fast, think on his or her feet, is passionate about what they're doing. They don't want the automatron, right? Nobody wants an automatron coaching their kids. But the problem is that the guy or girl, woman who is that type of coach, a lot of times what comes with that is they speak their mind, right? They speak their mind. They can't put up with bullshit. They don't work well in bureaucracies like we were talking. And those two things are hitting each other more and more in coaching. So it's like when I was a younger coach, I was in a pretty isolated environment. I was quite successful, but I crossed a lot of lines, man. Like in terms of I would swear in front of athletes and stuff like that, and today I wouldn't survive. Like there's no way that Derek Evely back in the '90s would survive right now in coaching in a club level. So I mean, I've tried to change, but it's tough because that expectation can squash down the passion, right? I guess what I'm saying is we have to be careful that we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. In terms of we want the passionate people, because the ones who are going to accept coaching as a lifestyle other than a job, right? But we're also burdening them with all of this. In your case, this is why you got out of it, right? With all this administration or expectation, and that's I think that's something we're gonna in coaching we're gonna have to deal with. Does that?
It does resonate, but it tends to they have the player coaches, and that the players like to form for. I can just talk about from my experience, just when I was training. If I had an attending who was teaching me, and coddled me and say, "Oh, it's okay, you missed this," I didn't really learn from that. For me personally, I think there's got to be some type of accountability. So I'm more of I learn better when, say, Scott, the shit sandwich. You did X, Y, Z well. That was great, but you could have done with it. But keep on doing what you're doing. There's got to be. I need to have constructive criticism. Not saying you're a piece of shit. You should do it wrong. Just you did that well, but this is what you can improve on, and let's go for that. But there's got to be some type of accountability for like residents as well as your athletes when you're mentoring them. That's what I feel, because otherwise they're not learning. If they're coddling, that makes that I don't know. I think the standard should be excellence throughout, and just that's what expectation is. You don't do mediocrity. Mediocrity is for somebody else.
Right.
If you want to be excellent, this is what you need to be excellent, but in a positive fashion. This is what my expectations for you, and be clear and concise. This is my expectations. This is what I expect you to do. And I got to tell you, I'm kind of hard on my residents because I want them to be good doctors. And I feel like you're doing disservice to your athletes if you're not kind of hard on them and tell them, this is what you need, because I don't know, but this is life and death we're dealing with. So this is it.
Well, that is the difference. So and I probably should have said at the beginning here. I mean, I'm not trying to compare coaching to what you do, but I think you are dealing with life and death, and if a guy fucks up and it costs someone their life, that's a big deal, right? I mean, that's a huge deal. So, if a young coach fucks up and an athlete loses a performance, depending on where the level of that performance is, I mean, it's it's okay. They'll have other chances, but I'm in full agreement with you. I mean, you can't. There's a way to do it properly, right? There's a way to do it properly, but some of us, I mean, I have zero tolerance for, I don't suffer fools well, right? And so I can, at times I've been known to be quite vocal and aggressive about it, and I don't always do it the best way, but I'm in total agreement with you. I mean, because it has to. It has, in my opinion, in our world, even in our world, it has to get done right. It just has to get done right.
And yeah, you're right. And I agree with you. But I think fear is good. I think if you take everything and you're not scared of anything, I think you're going to have a large downfall. I think fear is good. Fear prevents you from being a shitty athlete and a shitty doctor, but at the same time, you can't let it paralyze you.
I totally fucking agree. So I coached a girl in Britain. Okay, so I was the center director, as I said, but I told them when I took the job, if I can't coach, if you don't let me do a little bit of coaching, I'm not taking the job. Mm-hmm. So they said okay. So and I ended up with this girl that nobody really thought was going to do anything, and I coached her for 3.5 years there, and she threw the hammer, the ball on the wire, right? And she ended up on the British team. Nobody ever thought this girl was going to make she was actually world junior champion, which nobody ever thought she was going to do. And I'm sounding like I'm boasting, but there's a point to this. And I think the first year I coached her, she won world juniors. And then 2 years later, she's on her first Olympic team, and she actually made the final, okay? So in an Olympic setting, what happens is, you come out one day and you get, if you're in the throws, and you go through a qualifying round, okay? So you get 3 throws, that's it, 3 attempts. And if you're in the top 12, then you come back the next day, you get another 3 and then another 3. But then the next day's the final. Only 8 get to go to the 12 get to go to the final, and then they get 3 throws the next, and then it goes down to the last 8. Jeez, I've got to think about the numbers. It's been a while. Anyways, point is this, is she won the World Junior Championships on her last throw. Okay, last throw of the competition. It's kind of a rare thing in our world. She was known for doing this. She made the final and both times she broke British records, actually. She made the final at the Olympics on her last throw, broke in the stadium. That's kind of a rare thing too, right? And she did it on fear. This girl was the best competitor I have ever seen, that I've ever coached, and one of the best I've ever seen, because she just feared losing. Like, I hate to say it, it doesn't fit in with a lot of the with the narrative, or the or what a lot of us are taught to sort of teach athletes. We're taught to they have to create we need to help them create balance in their life. Fuck that. This girl, I mean, that was her thing. That's all, okay? And she struggled with it. Like, sure. It was difficult. She was a difficult girl sometimes to work with because of this fear. She would just, but you could also call it a hatred of losing, right? But man, hatred's not strong enough, man. It's not strong enough. It's fear. And I swear to God, she also won an Olympic bronze medal with an American coach year in the next Olympics. Okay, we're talking, this girl's half the size of the other girls in the field, right? She won it on her last throw, Olympic medal. I swear to God, man, all 3 times, World Juniors, her first Olympics, and when she won the medal, she just fucking willed it out there on the last throw because she just couldn't bear to lose.
But do you think that's part of the training, from her training and her experience? And
well, she has to have the she has to have the tools, and that's our job, is to put the tools into her and get her prepared, right? But and some athletes, maybe it's not so much fear driven, it's other things. But I don't. But my point is, I agree with you. It's not a bad thing, and if I had of probably earlier on in my career when I was younger, I would have tried to squash that in her. Like I would have tried to have I don't know what I would have done exactly in that case, but I mean, I would have like made it such an issue that trying to get her to be another way. But in her case, I was just like, this is just who she is. Let's just let her be who she is.
You're right.
And it's just leave it. Okay, she'll be all right.
Yeah, but you also think that when you're afraid, your body is going into hyperdrive. You're releasing serotonin, dopamine, all those neurotransmitters are firing. Like, let's do this, let's go, because you're in a fight or flight response.
Right.
So your body is just firing all cylinders. And a lot of times when you work in the ER, probably an athlete, like, when you have this craziness, you don't think about going to the bathroom or eating or anything. Like, let's just go, let's just do that. And you're exhausted afterward, but I feel like that's when you're best, when you're critical thinking and when you're doing something, because you are all in and there's nothing. You are so laser focused on what you need to do that I think it's just a physiological response. That girl, she's like, I don't want to lose. I'm afraid of losing. Everything's firing. Let's just do this. Let's go.
Yeah, totally. Oh my God, it was the 2 times that I was, I saw her do it a number of times, but particularly at that Olympics, and then I didn't coach her after that. American guy did. Well, he's actually Swedish, but he's lived in the U.S. for like 30 years. Anyways, but to be a part of that and watch that was truly something special. I mean, it's pretty incredible, and I think that's sometimes you gotta let them be who they're going to be, right?
Exactly.
I mean, so in terms of these personalities, that you work with as a leader of these 5 hospitals, or was it 5 hospitals?
It was 8 at one time.
Okay.
Before I left,
like, how do you manage the different personalities that you have to deal with? Like, and what happens in an ER setting if doctors have different opinions? How do you, like second opinion is one thing if you've been told you have, something that's maybe chronic or non-life threatening, but second opinions are different. Is there second opinions in ER medicine? I mean, does that even happen?
Not really. There's something called peer review. If a case goes awry, we discuss it as a group, and we have a judgment of if they messed up or what they think we could have done differently. But because
there's no time to run to another doctor.
No, not really. But sometimes you can bounce if you're working single shift. There's nobody to bounce it off of. But if you're double coverage, sometimes you go, hey, what do you think of this case? So we bounce stuff off of each other all the time.
Right.
And it's kind of, hey, I got this guy XYZ. What do you think? And I'm like, yeah. I'm like, this is what I'm doing. It's like, yeah, I would throw on XYZ. All right, cool. Or that sounds appropriate. Yeah, we do that all the time.
Right. You told me once that when things are really bad, I think you said when there's a certain level of what do you call it? A puncture. What did you call it at the beginning? Invasive wound.
Penetrating room?
Penetrating. Yeah. So when something like that happens, I don't know whether, and there's like the doors to the ER automatically shut. You said.
Yeah. So at most hospitals, if you work in a level 1, or usually places or hospitals that see a lot of penetrating trauma, like gunshots, stabbing, and stuff like that. Yeah, we go on lockdown just because. I know this is like in New York or LA or Chicago. If they're gang affiliated,
right,
and somebody shoots somebody up,
you're worried about them following in.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh my God.
So we have to lock it up because, and this happens everywhere, because people are gonna. I mean, those people talk about fear. They just want to finish a job.
Right.
So we have to go on lockdown, and security guys are out front to make sure nobody comes into the hospital. This happens almost everywhere.
So if you're in there and you're on, well, let's say you're on lockdown, but you've got multiple of these things going on, which I'm sure has happened, right?
For sure.
You know, if 3 or 4 people get shot and they all come to your hospital, like, how do you manage that mentally yourself? Like, how do you stay on task going from one patient to another, or one trauma situation to another? And the reason I'm asking this is because in coaching at the highest levels, you can at times find yourself in situations where you're in a really high stress environment with multiple athletes all competing at the same time. You know, and I'm not comparing, again, you know, someone throwing a discus or running 100 meters with what you're doing, but I'm trying to make an analogy.
It's very
but to them
similar.
it's important, right?
No, it's very similar. So let's say you have 3 athletes, or I have 3 trauma patients. Number one is you go to the sickest one first. I guess your athlete who needs the most coaching first, because some people are on autopilot, you know.
Yeah. The one who has one on his last throw to make qualifying, and he was expected to win the whole thing, right? And he's freaking out, right?
So yeah, like everything like that, you got to multitask, you got to compartmentalize. So, and it's for us, it's mostly algorithm based. So, for me, gunshot wounds are not easy, but it's algorithm. Like somebody's in charge of airways, somebody's in charge of like the pelvis area. We all know our roles.
Yeah, okay.
So we just kind of go, like, let's go. Like, I got airway, like, as the ER doctor, I got airway. The trauma surgeon has got the chest and the belly, and the nurse has got, like, the IV. So we all have, like, and we have, like, little areas that we all stand. Okay. So we have different areas. So we've done this so many times. It's just rote memorization and just doing it
Everybody
over
just instantly goes to
Let's
theirs.
just go, Boom, boom, boom. Okay, somebody else coming. All right, somebody could peel off and see that guy. If they need it, they'll bounce it over. But it's just, we just do it. Right. It's just because we've done it so many times, and it's just routine. I mean, and then we move on to the next one. But how, like emotionally, how do we deal with it? Nothing. We just.
Well, I'm just thinking mentally. How do you keep your game face on when you are, like, how do you maintain your game face when you're going from one to another? And let's say, the last one was, your mind is still spinning from it, and then you talked earlier, you maybe have to go out and talk to I don't want to get back into talking to family or anything like that, but or do you just not think about it, or is it just something that you adapt to mentally from doing? You just get good at it.
Like I feel like being in the ER, it's usually on fire 24/7. There's tons of patients. You don't know what's coming through the door, and you're just
that's what I'm talking about.
Laser focused that all the outside bullshit, I don't even think about. Like, I hate to say this, but when I'm working a shift and it's busy, like, I don't think about anything except the patient in front of me. And I think that's just been doing it for 15 years. You got somebody like, you have my 100% focus. I'm not thinking about anything else. Like, let's go, let's do this. When I'm done with this, all right. And then I think, all right, what do I have to do? Okay, the other patient, let's go. Boom, boom. And that's done. Next one. Right. And it's still in the back, but you have to be so, and that's just training.
That's just training. So they don't teach you that in doctor school.
In medical school, I mean,
if you have a young guy coming in, like you have a young intern, I guess is what you call him, right? Coming in, I'm going to assume that, I mean, to you, that's natural. You're just laser focused on that one. But was it always like that?
No, it's coaching. It's
right.
Like we usually want to have interns, like they don't know their ass from their elbow, Right. And I'm like, just stick on my hip. That's how you learn. Yeah. Questions, let me go.
And you don't want them in front of one patient, and the guy that they were just at 2 beds down died, right?
No,
and that's spinning through their head, and they're still thinking about that. And now they got to think about this guy who's 90 seconds from dying.
I want him next to me and see this is how you work.
Right.
This is it. This is what you signed up for.
Right.
And like. And I feel like it brings a certain person, probably an athlete as well, who wants to compete on that level. You have the innate abilities. You can't teach somebody to want it. You either got the goods or you don't.
Right.
You can't force somebody to get it. And sometimes people, like, this is not for them, or they choose not to go in a level 1 center. They may want
and that happens. They just leave it.
Yeah. Or they go, or maybe this is not setting for them. They don't want the blood and guts. Maybe they want like the more laid back. It's a different setting. So with my job, you can kind of choose what you want. Like I like the blood and the guts and the craziness. That's my personality. That's what I like, and I like multitasking, and it caters to a certain person who likes that. And I feel not, and I hate to say this, but not everybody has it. Kind of like athletes. Not everybody has that instinct that to be able to be laser focused in that moment at that time, and then break off and deal with something else. But you got to compartmentalize. Otherwise, you'd be spinning your head like crazy. You got to multitask. You got to have some type of ADHD in you.
Yeah, totally.
You have to have ADHD. I mean, most of us do.
A lot, not all, but a lot of the best athletes that I've coached or seen have that in them, right? Not all of them, but it does. If you can, it's a curse and a blessing, right? Like it's a blessing because, they can be so laser focused, but for a very short period of time, and then they go to something else. You have to teach them to manage that, right?
Correct.
They have to be able to handle it. And it's in training, it's not that big a deal, but when it becomes a big deal is when they're under pressure. Right, like really under pressure, and then you see all the rivets start to pop, right? Because they're starting to break down mentally because it's so hard on them. So you have to teach them that, and sometimes it comes from just the way to deal with it. You don't necessarily teach them. You compete the shit out of them. You make sure they just go to comp to comp to comp to comp, and they eventually learn to relax in the setting,
sure.
And then they become, it's a skill. It can be learned, but some don't. Some never learn it. Some just, they just never learn how to manage it.
I just think about like hand-to-hand combat, like professional boxers and professional MMA, especially MMA. They're in the ring for 5 minutes, and if somebody's getting a chokehold, how do you learn how to breathe and relax?
Yeah,
that's probably all training. Boxers, you're going in and someone wants to knock your head off. And how do you take a shot instead of being tense? Just take the shot.
Yeah.
It's very difficult. And I think it's all learned.
I meant to mention at the beginning that you're a boxer, and COVID. You got me into boxing. I ended up joining the same gym that you were at before, and you were just about to do your first real amateur fight. And then COVID hit, and it all got canceled. That's too bad. How's training going right now, by the way?
I mean, it's so sad because
you're back into it. So
yeah, but it's not the same. I mean, I lost 15 pounds. I was training like 4 days a week. I was so ready to go, and that was the worst. That I was fighting in 2 days, and I was just nervous. I wasn't even thinking about anything else. I was just so nervous about that fight, and then they canceled it, and I was so nervous and so anxious, and I wasn't sleeping. And I thought like if they cancel it, I get a wave of kind of like, wow, I don't have to worry about that. And then I felt just upset and sad that I did all this training, and then they canceled it. And I couldn't even imagine what professional athletes had to go through training for Olympics.
Yeah.
And so the question is, that really goes to the fact is how resilient are you as an athlete? If you're dealt with adversity, if it's losing a match, if it's training for something, they cancel it. Let's say you're fighting somebody or something they didn't make weight, or something happened. How do you say, all right, I trained so hard and I can't even compete? And how do I get back in the gym and say, all right, I'm going to be ready for next time, and make sure you don't have that inevitable, that kind of the downslope, or the downstream slope. So that's the tenacity that people have.
It's going to be interesting when this all ends, or I wouldn't say blows over is probably not the term, but we finally find ourselves out of this. I'm not doing a lot of active coaching right now. I'm doing a little bit. I'm about to start coaching a girl here in Chicago, but it hasn't started yet. But it'll be interesting to hear from my colleagues how athletes are dealing with that, because it's a long period, right? Mm-hmm. And they are having competitions, but it's not the ones that drive them, right?
Correct.
Like world champs, Olympics has been postponed, and God only knows if it's going to actually happen. But one of the characteristics about athletes, high-end athletes or the best athletes, is that no matter what, there's no stopping them, right? Like,
Sure.
I mean, from the time that they knew they wanted to do what they're doing, nobody's going to get in their way. Well, people, that's one of the things I say in the sport parent course I do, and when I talk to coaches, is like, sometimes it's not about managing the athlete. It's about not managing them. It's about getting out of the way. Like, just make sure they're in the environment they're in, which is, that's your coaching, and you're presenting, you're giving them the program. But really, overall, you just need to get the fuck out of the way, because they're so talented and they're so driven that it at a high level, it becomes more about what you don't do than what you do. There's no such thing in my mind, with, there's exceptions to this, but you're really not motivating high-end athletes. It's always more about bringing them back, calming them down, demotivating them, because if you let them go, they'll kill themselves, right? Like, they'll work themselves into the ground, or they'll drive themselves crazy or something like that, right? So it's really, it's, the perception a lot of people have about coaching, and this applies to a lot of levels. But when you're talking about really, really talented athletes, they just, or talent in anything, there's no stopping them. They are going to go. They are going to get it done. They're going to find a way. So rather, like, if you're a parent, right, of an athlete like that, that kind of changes the way you think about it, right? You don't need to do all this shit that you see parents doing. The more input you have into it, the more you're just getting in their way. They know what, they may not even be aware of it, but they know what they need to do. It'll just leave them alone. They'll find their way to some degree. Your job is to make sure that they're in the right environment for that to happen. And once you've done that, you just step out of the way and let them do their thing. But
so what about, that's a question. So what about the athlete who is incredibly talented, and they have creative, but they don't have that drive?
Yeah, they're fucked.
Yeah, right. You have to have both.
Yeah, they're not. There's not. That's what I mean. You can't. No, you can motivate them to a certain level to get through this or get through that, but dude, I mean, it's you're talking about, for an athlete to peak, if it's done properly, you're talking about, on average, 10 years of high performance training. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, that is, you're probably looking at 6 to 12 workouts a week. Could be 5 of those are intensive. And intensive, like, the normal person can't really understand what I'm talking about when I say intensive. Like, they're intense. Now, they train for it and they adapt to it and all of that, but that is very difficult to manage. And no amount of money or no amount of fame or fortune is going to, and all those are factors that do help bring the athlete along, right? But without the intrinsic desire, it's just not going to happen, right? And it's that desire, I believe, comes from when they're first introduced to the sport. There needs to be an element of, they need to experience a large degree of play experience. Okay, so they need to be able to just have fun in the sport and not be over managed and not be over structured. And that's where that desire comes from, and sometimes you have to try different sports before they find the one that does flip the switch, right? But every single athlete that I've ever seen or worked with, every single one had this. They were just, there's never a question if they were going to show up to workout. Yeah. There was just never a question. I mean, it's not on anyone's radar, right? They're going to be there. They're going to be ready to go. And, right? Yeah. It's more about stopping them from doing too much and calming them down and that kind of thing, right? Because there's not, like, you don't have, your best ER doctors, you're not, if they're supposed to be in there at 5 o'clock to start their shift, you're not consistently going, oh my God, it's 5:15, where's Joe, right? They're there. They're there. They're ready to go. And as soon as they get there, boom, they're, that's what there's just no question. So, And when you're talking about, 10 years of that, and some athletes it's 12, 14, 16 years. I mean, there's, like I said, there's no amount of external reward that is strong enough to pull them through that. Now, there may be the odd example, maybe Tiger Woods, got through it somehow, but I guarantee you, Tiger Woods, for whatever went on with him and his dad or whatever people talk about, who knows what really the truth is, but that he had it. Of course he had it, because he just wants to be good all the fucking time, right?
Yeah.
That's what they have. No one has to remind them to practice. No one has to remind them to do this. Now, you may have to help them manage their lifestyle, because that's a skill too. But in terms of showing up and getting the work done, no, there's never a question. Okay, so I don't want to take up too much more of your time. Thanks for doing this. I really appreciate it. But, and this is the one I've been setting you up for. My boss when I was in England was Dutch. He was hired. He was the guy. He's the head coach, and he was hired to lead all of us into that Olympics, and he did a great job. And he's become a good friend of mine since then. His name's Charles. And he said to me once, he said, people don't understand that, or a lot of coaches don't understand that professional coaching is a lifestyle, not a job, right? And you and I chatted about this informally when we run into each other on our back patio or whenever. When you have a job like this, and it is a lifestyle, so even though you have shifts at the hospital, time spent at work, it's very hard to shut it off when you come home and be present. One of the things that I struggled with a lot when my kids were younger was, because when I was in Britain, I mean, that job was 24/7, man. I mean, you were just like, you weren't there 24/7, but mentally you were there 24/7, right? And I don't drink, so I don't have that to calm me down. So how do you manage it to come home, and you have a 1.5 and a 3-year-old? How do you manage it in terms of, I mean, maybe not shutting it off, but be present mentally for your family after you've come off of a shift where you've seen 14 people get shot or something like that, right? I mean, or you have, all these issues at work that are, it's on you, right? Or you're building a hospital like you did. I mean, that was a huge load on your shoulders, because we talked about it. Like how do you manage that?
I struggle with it.
Yeah.
It's really hard. To be honest with you, I've been reading some books, like by Howard Schultz. He's the CEO of Starbucks.
I've heard that name.
Yeah, he founded Starbucks. And I wish I had a better way. I think physical activity would help. Just an hour to get your mind kind of clear. But it's 24/7, especially being a CEO of a new hospital. It's really hard to be present. What I feel like I do. It's a balancing act. So I feel like you're in a 3-legged stool. You have your job, you have your kids, and then you have your wife.
Right.
And all those got to be strong. And a lot of times it's not. So the hospital's going good. I'm seeing my kids doing it, but I'm not treating my wife the way she needs to be, like going for date nights or for time.
You're not attentive.
Yeah, not attentive. Or with my
kids. And even when you are there, sometimes you're not there.
Sometimes not there.
Yeah.
Especially with my kids. Sometimes with my kids, and sometimes they say, "Daddy, put the phone away." I'm like, "You're absolutely right." It's really hard to put the phone down, and I'm struggling with it.
Yeah. No, I hear you, man. And I mean, yeah. But, dude, I watch you with Jack and Ricky. But I watch you. You come home. You look exhausted, and coming home for you could be 6 o'clock in the afternoon, or it could be 2 a.m, or it could be whatever, right? And you come home and it's never the same. And that itself is a stress, like not having regular sleep patterns. Holy shit. But that's a whole nother thing. But, and I watch. I mean, I remember it wasn't long ago. The other night, man, we were all out front. We were chatting. All the boys are out there, and which are my neighbors, and the guys who drink all got a drink in there. And you came out, and you've got Jack in his little car, and you just kind of walk right by. So you don't, you kind of say, you know enough not to engage and spend your time with him, and then you go back home. I mean, a lot of people don't do that, man. Like, I told you before we were chatting about this. I said, like, look, I'm an expert in very few things. Okay. I'm an expert in a very, very niche part of training methodology and all that kind of stuff. And I'm an expert in one event. In a sport that a lot of people around here really don't understand. But one thing I think I am an expert in, aside from those two very small things, is I've seen good parenting. Okay, so when you are a coach of a in a club setting where you're dealing with developmental athletes, and I did that for years and years, you get intimate with families the way that teachers don't. Okay, because you are, or most teachers don't. So you're going over to their homes on a regular basis. You're dropping kids off. You're driving them around. So you get. I've seen the best. Okay, I'm not great, and one of my regrets is that at that time when my kids were your kids' age, I was a lot of the time I wasn't there. We were adopting Mass at that time. When he came home, and I was okay. I was good, but I wasn't good. A lot of I really wish. Maybe my standards for myself are too high, but I really wish I had done a better job that way. But you blow me away. You're a good dad, dude. Like
Thanks.
you really are, and you and your wife do a great job from my perspective. Unless you're beating them inside the house, and I'm not
beating us.
You do, but that's difficult, right? Like it's not easy because you come home. My wife works this job where she is like it's another one of those jobs. It's 24/7, man, and it's insane the emails she gets. Like
sure.
She went out. We went out once for 2.5-3 hours, and she came home. She had 300 emails. I'm not embellishing that. It was like 350 or something. It was like, it's not unusual for her to get 100 emails in 2 hours or an hour. Like that's not a regular occurrence, right? And when she's my point is this: is when she finishes her day, she doesn't want to read, right? She doesn't want to talk to anybody on the phone. She wants to sit down, relax, and watch TV. But we're at the stage now where our kids probably need more attention than we're giving them. We talk about how bad we are as parents all the time about it, but we just want to sit. She just wants to sit and vegetate.
Yeah.
Watch an hour of TV, man, then go to bed. That's it. So, I'm not sure if there's a question there, right? But it's like, I know how difficult that is.
Yeah, and I appreciate it. Dude, I'm fucking exhausted.
Yeah.
And it's weird because most people now with COVID are at home. They're working from home, more time with family. They're around the house because they're probably at work. Husband and wife, 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. They're home.
Yeah.
And I'm like the opposite.
Yeah. COVID's actually been good for us in a lot of ways as a family.
Yeah, and nothing changed. Like my wife doesn't leave the house. She goes to the grocery store. That's it. I'm still going to work, coming home, and when I come home, like it's exhausting because. Yeah. But if I don't do it with my kids, I'm not gonna get that. I'm not gonna get the time back. Yeah. He's 1.5, 2.5. But like when I work in 7 a.m. to 5 and I come home, like I have to be quiet because I gotta run upstairs, take my scrubs off, put them in the washing machine, and jump in the shower. And if they hear me, I can't even take a shower.
Yeah, I know.
Like they're in my shower.
You can always come over here and shower, dude, if that's a problem.
And I have to be quiet. Like he's in the shower. Like I don't have 5 minutes.
Yeah, I know. Oh my God. Yeah, no, I remember those days, dude.
Yeah, I remember. And then like my wife is exhausted. She's like, "Here, take him." I'm like, we're both just drained.
Yeah. And you feel like, and then you feel guilty because you're thinking, fuck, I wish I was back at work. It's fair. It's hey, listen, man. Well, maybe Melissa won't hear this, but maybe. But I used to be like that all the time. I mean, back then when it's like, God, man, I'd rather be out freaking coaching than listen to this shit go on, right? Because kids are screaming or they're wanting your attention and man, I know it's difficult. Well, we're not out of the woods in that sense yet here. It gets better as they grow older. And maybe, like I said, COVID in a lot of ways has actually been good for us. I don't know if it's been great for my kids because it's too much time in front of a screen and too much time at home. And we're struggling with that big time. But
well, and I feel like people resent me. Like, you need to get up and go to work. I'm like, yeah, I get to swim in a sea of COVID all day.
Yeah.
It's not
great.
Oh
my God, that's it. Yeah. Oh my God, yeah.
But you're right. But I can still do my job. But for the stay-at-home dads or moms now with COVID, especially little kids, that's gonna be the hardest job in the world.
Yeah.
You can't go anywhere. You can't drop. Where are you gonna drop them off?
Yeah.
There's nothing.
Well, you never get away from them.
You never get away. You're with them all from morning to night. It's
yeah. No, I know, man. It's and there's and then when you, I mean, I don't know about you, but sometimes I would just snap and I would be like, I'd either bark, explode, and then you've got the guilt that comes with that, right? Because afterwards you're like, oh my God, right? Just such an asshole, and then you got your kids aren't old enough yet, but with mine, if I lose my shit, it doesn't happen that much anymore, but I try not to anyways, but it's always been an issue with me. And so I will have to, I'll wait and I'll go back into their room, sit and say, look, and I'll just say to them, look, I'm really sorry. I shouldn't have said that. That was stupid. I mean, 30 years ago, parents weren't saying this to their kids, right? Not really, right? And maybe they aren't now, but I don't know. Probably more than we think. But I'll sit down and I'll say, I've said to my kids at times, look, don't be like me.
Sure.
Don't be like me. Like, because I'm afraid I'm setting a bad example, right? And I don't know any other way. I'm trying to change. I'm trying to manage it. But fuck, man, you got all this weighing on you, and all this. And it's some of us, it's our nature.
Yeah, but I think it takes a real strong man or woman to set pride at the door. Because all of us, I mean, that's part of who we are, especially people who are coaches and athletes and people have careers that push them to the precipice every single day. So you kind of have to check. That's hard. That's the thing we all struggle with. You kind of got to check that in the door, and sometimes you gotta eat some shit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? To have peace around, just suck it up. And some people can't do it. You just gotta eat some shit.
I was talking to, again, I did this my other podcast yesterday. The first part of it with my buddy Stu, and he's single, but he like everybody else, he's dealing with issues and stuff, and so he's part of this online group he was talking about coaches and professionals, guys at the high end of our sport, and anyways, and he was saying, it's work, right, to maintain that kind of that level of sanity or sort of mental health, whatever your definition or your level of that is, and he's right. I mean, I learned that when I quit drinking. I mean, it's work. You have to put, the moment you stop working on that, for me it's reading books, right? And for you, you said you're reading.
I have 4 books. I don't even have time to read a book.
I know.
I would love to read a book.
Well, what I've learned to do is, I'm a bit of an insomniac. Like I don't have a problem getting to sleep, but I'm up early. I'm up
for
early.
sure.
So I'm always up between 3 days ago I was up at 3:30 in the morning, but I'm usually up between 4:30 and 5:30, and I get up like 2 hours before everybody else, and I sit down and I read, right?
That's awesome.
And that's that's really helped, and working out. Like, I'm back. It's been a year now. Like, you got me back into the gym. I started the boxing thing, and then I hurt my arm, and so I had to stop that because it's been over a year now. It's still bothering me, but I started lifting, and so now my son and I, most mornings we go for an hour ride on the bike at 7, and then we hit the gym, and then I come home, and between like 5 and 7 I've read, and then I'm ready to start my day. It takes that to keep me calm.
But that's what I think that we're bad at. I think a lot of us do things very well. I think routine is so important.
Totally.
Okay, here's an example, and I'm sure a lot of people do this. If I get up, I always wake up at 3 a.m. I'm up from like 3 to 5 when I go back to sleep. I always check my emails. Why the fuck am I checking my emails at 3 in the morning?
That's the kiss of death right there, man.
It's terrible.
Yeah.
So what I try to do, and it's hard, I try to leave my cell phone in the bathroom, plugged in, so I can't check it. The second thing, which I used to do before I started this job, I used to not even meditate. I used to sit, just Indian style, and just breathe for 10 minutes. I set the alarm because 10 minutes, it doesn't sound like it's a long time. Just sit, shut 5 minutes. Just sit down and just breathe for 5 minutes. And I used to do that, and it used to start my day just fresh. And I went away from that, and just having this conversation, I got to get back into that.
You should. Me too. But my mind is racing. I mean, I'm just one of these minds that races all the time.
But I think all of us we have so much there's so much going on from climate change to politics to religion to the constant barrage of data and news.
Dude,
like it
and
doesn't
it's way worse
stop.
Here. It's way worse here.
Oh, in America?
Like moving here.
Sure.
No offense to any American listening to this, but man, you guys put so much unnecessary stress on yourselves. It's fucking unbelievable. Like from your healthcare situation, your politics, and now you've got COVID, and the political divide. Oh my God, there's so much to worry about. I mean, it's just like, and not that we all. Well, I mean, these are real things, right? Like they're real stress,
but
especially COVID.
Americans are so okay. Just because I lived in Australia and New Zealand, and I think a lot of the world does, they work so they can enjoy their life. We are the opposite here. We just work, and I know that Americans actually look at people from Spain and their siesta like, oh, that's laughable. Why is it laughable? They take a couple hours to relax before they open up. Or you eat in Argentina, you eat dinner at 10 o'clock. How cool is that? They're like, that's insane. Then you can't get up in the morning. We're just programmed differently from a young age in America just to go.
Canadians aren't that far off either. But, and we look at people who don't have what we have. They're not living in $1 million house, and they're not, they don't drive fancy cars. Like in a third world country, maybe that's an extreme example, but people in other cultures who don't have what we have in terms of material things, and we think, we kind of feel sorry for them. Sometimes I look at them and go, are you kidding me, man? They're the ones who've got it right. They're the ones who understand, what life is really about. Because, I've been started sort of floating a lot of this around in my head lately, and I guess I'm at that. How old are you right now?
44.
44. Okay, so you had kids about the same time I did. 40. I had my first kid at 40, and now I'm 55. So you start to think about, I'm at that stage. You start to think about things because death is coming up soon, and I think the moments, like you had those great moments, like you're oh my God, I'm so glad I remember this. You took Jack out one day. And you followed the garbage truck in our neighborhood around.
Dude, every Friday?
I love that.
Tim's his buddy. Tim the garbage man.
Truck. He's a year and a half old. He loves trucks,
loves
man. He's a boy, man. He's a boy.
I wish I was just happy about anything. He is the truck.
Totally. Wouldn't that be great? Oh my God.
He's a truck.
And you follow, and like, or you listen to a piece of music that takes you back to a time, and you just forget about everything. You think about that. I honestly think, man, that's all we get, right? That's all we really get. It's like things aren't supposed to get better than that, I don't think. And we think for the most part, right? And we think by getting all this shit that there is a place that we need to get to go, blah blah blah, and it's like, no, if you just relax, you can actually experience those moments. They're actually all around you, right? Mm-hmm. You don't appreciate them. They pass you by, and it's like, for me, it's like I'm really starting to, when those things happen, I kind of stop and I try to think, okay, this is what it's all. Just stop. Like when I quit drinking, early on, I was like, there would be moments, I would have these moments of clarity, and something would happen, and I would go, okay, well, if I was still drinking, this wouldn't have happened. right? Like this, like I would not be enjoying this right now, because if I was drinking, I'd be shit-faced in the corner, or I'd be whatever, drive my car drunk home or something like that. And I would stop and just mentally think about it. Like, that's it. That's all. I mean, that's the simplest way I could put it. I'd think about it, and that would go into the bank, right? It'd go into the mental bank, and I would be like, okay. And you get enough of those, and far enough away from the last time you drank, you're shit-faced. And when I drank, I mean, I never drank. I mean, I never had a drink up front, like, just a drink. I mean, it was always shit.
You're like an athlete. You do everything all or none.
Totally. So, anyways, and that's what this is like. This is what I'm thinking. It's like this is. I'm trying to every time one of these moments comes, I have a great game of ping pong with my kids, or a great moment with Mass or something like that. Or a song comes on, I feel really good.
That's the good stuff.
Yeah, I just like, okay, this is it. This is as good as it gets, man. Stop trying to make it better.
Yeah. And I think we got to stay away. I know it sounds, I think you have to do a digital clean. Sometimes you got to stop looking at the social media and the news. Like I pretty much, did a couple of interviews the last couple of months for COVID, but I don't watch the news anymore, and I'm so much happier.
Yeah, totally. Same here. I don't.
It's not like I'm burying my head in the sand. It's just like, look, I hear the big things, but it's not going to change anything right now.
It's going to kill everybody eventually, man.
It's so stressed out.
Yeah. And you guys are still at the stages when you can manage that with like your kids haven't quite got on it yet, which is good. They shouldn't be, right? You know that. We've talked about that. My advice, hold it off as long as you fucking can. The devices, like the phones, like no matter what their friends are doing, no matter, hold off as long as, it's going to happen. It has to happen eventually. Hold off as long as you can, no matter what it is. We held off until this year, and we got our kids phones because we're worried about them being, this is pre-COVID, we're worried about them being out in Chicago without a phone. Where I come from, it wasn't a worry. No matter where they were safe. Not here. So they need phones. And but with the phone comes fucking everything else. And it's a slippery slope. And anyways, but yeah, hold off as long as you can, because it is not healthy, man.
I know. My daughter wakes up every morning and she watches YouTube for an hour, some stupid shows.
Yeah, that's okay.
That's
but
routine.
we all watch TV, and Saturday mornings I'd sit in front of the TV for 2 or 3 hours when I was a kid. That's okay. Fair enough. But social media and messaging with, constantly be on your phone, that's different, right? That's a level of connectivity that's not, it's fine I think it's fine for them to be sitting for an hour or two a day in front of TV or something like that. But when they are constantly engaged in that fucking thing, it's really bad. And one of my kids is there. One of them manages it very well on his own, and I'm not worried about that. And there's one in the middle. And, it's really, it's a scary thing, man. Because COVID complicates the whole goddamn thing, because how do you keep your, look, man, tell me if this resonates with you. Kids are screaming, fighting, all hells break loose, and you have these two little devices here that you can just put in front of them, and house is quiet, man. It's like, that's nice.
But you're right. But that's a lot of things. I'm worried about downstream effects of COVID, especially kids in K and grammar school, especially in high school. This is so. One thing that I'm concerned about is that attention span. A lot of times we don't have a great attention span to begin with. I think everybody's got some degree of ADHD. When we grew up, we watched cartoons, and if it was a half an hour, we watched the show, we watched the commercials, and that's what we did. Nowadays, they flip from one video to next video every 5 minutes. Everything's done in little bites. So I can't even watch a whole movie with my kid because they get bored. And I'm also worried about as you grow as a person, it's the interaction that you have with people, with friends, going out. They have missed a whole year of growing. And is it that much easier to jump up in the saddle? Kids are resilient. Like, a lot of adults won't wear a mask because they're idiots. But a lot of them think that it's just being responsible. It's just being a good human. Just wear a mask. But I'm worried about kids who are, how easy for them to be jump back in culture, like take the mask off, because they're as scared as we are. Or that's what other stuff that keeps me up.
I'm really worried about it too. I was just thinking about this yesterday. You know, we the whole point of these lockdowns and these measures that were taken, and I'm in full compliance and agreement with all of it. But the problem is that what's the long-term effect going to be for this generation of kids who lost? I mean, it was bad enough before COVID with kids not getting enough physical activity. Oh man, it just went into warp speed the last 8 months. We probably went. I don't think I'm exaggerating when I say we went 20 years ahead. You know, I have a daughter that has probably been out of the house. The only time she's been out of the house since COVID started was for some of her dance lessons, right? You know, and she's done some stuff inside, but
So she goes days inside. She'll go 3 or 4 days.
Days and days inside. So does Mass. I mean, Mass's volleyball just started up again last night, so that's good. We got her. And Polly, you know, she you know, she's out 2 or 3 times a week to dance, but other than that, no, there's no well, where's she gonna go, right? Like, I mean, there's like, we moved here, you know, they started school, they don't have local friends.
Right.
There aren't really any kids around her age.
Right.
You know, I'm not, you know, I mean, it's, you know, and she does a good job of managing it, right? She stays, you know, she's fit and she's, but it's not, I'm not, you know, I'm worried about her, but I think there are lots others in way worse situations.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, and so I think it's really going to be tough, man. I mean, and I don't know, man. It's just, I don't know. I think we're all going to have to contribute to fixing this fucking problem once the dust clears, because I think we're not fully aware of the damage that's being done right
Correct.
now. And I don't say that in the context that I think we're doing anything wrong. I say that it's just the way it is, right?
Yeah.
It's just the way it is. But it's going to, maybe this could be the best thing, and everybody's going to have to put all their bullshit aside for us to get back to normal. Maybe that's wishful thinking, but maybe that's what's going to happen. I don't know.
That's why I don't go on social media. It's just people are yelling all the time. I just can't deal with trolls.
I can't deal with that.
I don't know.
Listen, man, I think we just solved a bunch of the world's problems.
Yeah, right.
I really appreciate you taking the time to sit down and chat with me. I thought it was fantastic, and it's great. It went way better than I could have hoped. So, listen, thanks for all your work. Thanks for everything you do. Thanks for being a good neighbor. Thanks for listening to me babble on every time I run into you. Keep looking after your kids and your family and being a great dad and a great doctor. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thanks, Derek. Appreciate it, buddy.